ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume 8. Before I start this review, I have to address the elephant in the room here, which is I have a bit of a black eye. And the situation is as follows. I was just going down the street, minding my own business, when this unsuspicious old man asked me, "Hey, are you the guy that makes the best ReZero videos?" And I said, "Yes, of course I am." And all of a sudden 20 ninjas attacked me, so I had to defeat the assailants. And there were 20 of them, and I managed to defeat them all successfully, but I have this black eye to show for it. So, it's just minding your own business, down the streets, you're attacked by ninjas, usual stuff, daily life. So now on a serious note, ReZero Volume 8 with Reinhardt and Felt on the cover, and honestly this is one of the only covers I really don't like just because it doesn't fit the story. Felt is not a main character in Arc 3 and she just doesn't fit as the cover character. Obviously this doesn't take away my enjoyment of the book, but it's a bit silly that she's not even in the book she's the cover of. The last time we saw Felt was back in Volume 4 with a brief mention in Volume 5, and the next time we see her, well, for the 1% chance that someone is watching these videos blind, it will be a while before we see Felt again. I don't know, maybe it's buying the physical books that awakens the snobby collector in me, but this cover always felt out of place. I think this would be a great spot for a Petelgeuse cover or maybe even a Julius cover, because just like the character, this cover for Felt is a bit premature. Anyway, after defeating the White Whale, the author says to Subaru, "Hop back on the pain train, young man, you have enjoyed life enough." And constantly throughout the book, Subaru is always wondering, there's no way it's this easy, right? Something's about to go down, and that mirrors what the reader is thinking, because if you've read ReZero, you know that something bad is always about to happen. So reading this volume is very tense, but in a way also very exciting. So let's get right into Volume 8. The volume starts out with Subaru understandably nervous, leading all these veteran warriors, and to make matters worse, he is in the very tricky situation of having to deal with Julius. This Subaru-Julius dynamic to me is the most interesting plot point in this volume. The dynamic between Subaru and Julius is obviously awkward. The conflict between them was very recent, especially if we look at the timeline. When I was reading ReZero for the first time, I always thought this would be a conflict to be addressed more down the line. By having them reunite so soon, it makes the dynamic even more interesting, because they clearly don't hate each other, but they are very tentative towards one another, especially Subaru. We know that Julius isn't all bad, and Subaru has matured a lot in this short time, but still the conflict is fresh on everybody's minds, and they crack quite a lot of jokes about it, which leaves Subaru very uncomfortable. I love that the author challenges Subaru in every possible way to force him to mature faster. For a simple redemption arc, just defeating the White Whale would have been enough, and yet Subaru still has to try and save everybody, deal with Petelgeuse, and handle his own personal issues with Julius. This is a fascinating development. In case you haven't noticed, I really like Arc 3. The funny thing is, despite all the previous drama and current awkwardness, Julius' interactions with Subaru throughout the book are actually mostly playful. He even goes for jokes that are more on the nose, like, "He's the owner of the face I hate the most. Incidentally, I presume your second most hated face belongs to me?" I think this is Julius's own way of acknowledging what happened and trying to move past it, and if I'm being honest, some of Julius's comments are very funny. For a character that is shown to be very snobby and uptight, he has a good sense of humor. Julius's humor is very self-aware. He's just going to keep pointing out the awkwardness until it stops being awkward, and honestly, I can respect that, and it makes for a very fun read. Julius also tries to support Subaru various times throughout the book, like for example, "If it will make the talk go more smoothly, use me to your heart's content." Obviously, being the finest of knights, Julius will always conduct himself in a professional way, but he tries to make it a point to show that he is not reluctant to help Subaru. At a point, he even offers to teach him to use spirits, which reads like a passing comment, but sounds like a very important thing. After all, he is the strongest spirit knight, and Subaru is a rival camp member. So we can see that Julius gained a lot of respect for Subaru after the White Whale battle, and he recognizes that Subaru is trying to be better. So even if it's a bit clumsy, Julius is trying to mend the relationship in his own way. After all, he was never really proud of what he did at the capital to begin with. From Subaru's perspective, while he's tolerating Julius, it's very obvious that he's trying to limit their interactions as much as possible while making the plan work. For example, when they first go to strike down Petelgeuse, Subaru suggests that Wilhelm strikes him down, even though Julius did not participate in the White Whale battle and is the fresher fighter. He did say that it would be kind of strange for the knightly Julius to do a sneak attack, but there's more to it than that. Even Ferris calls him out eventually and says that Subaru is subconsciously avoiding Julius. By the end of the book, they have a moment of camaraderie, which makes the ending even more tragic. The book is building up this tension so that Julius and Subaru finally get along and that they finally manage to get a victory against the witch cult and Petelgeuse, and at the end of the book, Subaru is possessed and the one who gives him the mercy of death is none other than Julius himself. This is so tragic, it's almost a dark comedy. It's kind of funny in a weird way. Or maybe I just have a weird sense of humor that is getting even weirder by reading these light novels. Maybe, who knows. Focusing more on Subaru, he's not just dealing with Julius, he's still dealing with his own personal issues. In one passage, Subaru says that he still hates himself. So even after starting from zero with Rem, he still has his own personal issues. It's not like he can just click a magic button and they all disappear. In another very revealing passage, Subaru says, "I don't deserve to go back to the mansion yet." Even Julius is surprised at this comment, which shows how much Subaru is undervaluing himself and his achievements. I would like to see how some of these interactions would play out if Ram was present, but seeing Subaru deal with all this without his usual emotional crutch is way more interesting from a narrative standpoint. Another thing I found interesting in Volume 8 is that Subaru struggles a bit with morality. Unlike the demon beasts, the witch cultists are people, and even if they're brainwashed or crazy or whatever, it is people that are being massacred by Subaru's group, which he is leading. Up until now, we've never seen our main character approach this topic, and in these fantasy worlds, the deaths of background characters are usually largely ignored. Even Wilhelm himself tells to Subaru that he should not concern himself with the witch cult because they are completely irredeemable. Subaru knows that the witch cultists are monsters, but what he's worried about is even worse than that. He finds himself becoming desensitized to death, and keep in mind, this is just a kid from Japan, not a hero from a fantasy world, so his moral compass is very different from the other characters. This is contrasted by the rest of the crew telling Subaru unanimously not to worry about the witch cultists. Ferris even tells him to not even try to understand them, and this is a very big thing coming from the healer of the group. Speaking of Ferris, he plays a bigger role in Volume 8 and we get to know more about him, and he is a character that is full of contradictions. We know that he is deeply insecure just like Subaru because he is weak and not suited for battle, yet he always finds himself in a battlefield. He has his talent for healing, which gives him a purpose, but yet it is also a burden, because it leaves him feeling very guilty for those he could not save, which is the only way he views himself as useful. "I know best how useless I've been. I've let 11 people die, and I couldn't even stop enemies from killing themselves. I'm all talk." Ferris hates when people throw their lives away even if they are the irredeemable witch cultists, so on one hand he recognizes they are irredeemable and told Subaru not to worry about them, on the other hand he still feels guilty when they die. Ferris is a very complex character, and his unique way of viewing himself and the world makes him stand out from the other characters. There's also this brotherly camaraderie between Subaru and Ferris, since they are both weaklings who are constantly reminded of their own powerlessness. Ferris worries for Subaru and tries to advise him at many points during the book, for example in the witch cultist conversation. "You're particularly vulnerable, Subaru, so be careful." And in return, Subaru also worries for him. "He didn't die, thanks to you. You're a bigger deal than you think you are. No, really, I'm totally serious." Ferris also teases Subaru a lot in a way that's very different from, let's say, Ram or even Julius. For example, just after the line I just read, he says, "Are you trying to seduce cute little Ferry coming to my side of the fence?" So this part of the character is consistent from the first time they met, when Ferris nibbled on Subaru's ear. It's fascinating to me how this eccentric and cheerful character can have so much going on for him behind the scenes. Volume 8 really made me appreciate Ferris as a character more, and also there's a fan-servicey image for those of you that care about that. Another great thing about Volume 8 is that we get to see both Rum and Emilia, who we haven't seen in a while, and we get to see both of them in action. We see Rum fighting, which isn't very common, and she's pretty strong even without her horn. She manages to hold both Wilhelm and Ricardo for a bit, and when she's overwhelmed, she shows just how resolute she is. "Kill me, I will not be defiled." Now that's metal, and also she brings her typical sassy comments, which always bring a smile to my face. "So you are still Lady Emilia's dog, you're fine with that?" As for Emilia, this is the first time we see her fighting since Elsa, I believe, and she manages to defeat Petelgeuse on her own. With Puck. But this is still a very impressive feat, not many people in the world of ReZero could do that. Her action scene is very dynamic, very nice to read. She's gliding through the ice, she's making ice clones, which I guess Uzumaki Emilia can just do now, and she's kicking Petelgeuse in the face. A kick is not an attack you would expect from a mage. Behind that naive character, Emilia is very strong and very cool actually, a complete contrast to our main character obviously. And there is one peculiar moment where after defeating Petelgeuse, Emilia sheds a tear. What is that about? Keep that in mind. Speaking of Petelgeuse, can we take a moment to appreciate how much of an annoying evil bastard this guy is? First, we have a moment where Subaru and Mimi explode his corpse in an attempt to make sure he's dead, which looks like a parody of The Cautious Hero, where even I'm like, that's a bit much, buddy. But then Petelgeuse does indeed come back. It's very fitting and once again almost comedic in a sense that Subaru's biggest opponent is also one that, like him, has many lives and just keeps coming back. Petelgeuse is highlighted in Volume 8 as a very dangerous threat with very specific weaknesses. For example, his unseen hands are deadly except for those who can see them like Subaru or who can manage to get around them like Wilhelm. He needs to have all 10 of his fingers gone to be truly defeated, and to top it off, he can possess Subaru himself. This man is completely mad, he's crazy, cannot be reasoned with, and he's very strong and just keeps coming back. The main criticism after Volume 7 was that Petelgeuse didn't seem like much of a threat after the White Whale, but Volume 8 completely fixes that. Petelgeuse is even worse than we thought. Now, for my final thoughts, as you know from the previous review, Volume 7 is probably one of my favorite volumes in the whole series, but Volume 8 is pretty good as well. It's more character focused and allows us to explore characters like Subaru, Julius and Ferris. It re-ups the stakes by showing Petelgeuse's full abilities and once again reasserting him as the main villain of Arc 3, which leaves the reader curious, just how is Subaru getting out of this situation? Giving the MVP for Volume 8 is actually quite hard. I thought about not having one, but after more thought, here it is. Our main man, Petelgeuse, he is the driving force behind Arc 3, and he truly makes this volume enjoyable with his annoying and evil perseverance. So my MVP goes to Petelgeuse Romanée-Conti. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment with your own MVP if you agree with me or not, and I will see you guys for Volume 9, the final volume of Arc 3. Bye bye.